Hey, it's Rob Kendall, and this is Where'd Your Money Go? Today, we're going to talk about the biggest scam in Indiana government, the referendum. That's where schools violate your constitutional rights because they can't get their act together. Before we get into this ploy to raise your taxes, a little history. Once upon a time, Indiana was the Wild West of property taxes. Those are the taxes you pay each year for the privilege of living in your home. If you lived in a home of $300,000, you could pay up to $12,000, or 4%, a year. Basically, local governments, most of which are school corporations, were using your home as their personal piggy bank. Then one day, a bunch of people got really pissed and demanded change. They stormed the State House and various other governmental agencies across the state. So in 2008, Governor Mitch Daniels headed up a movement to cap property taxes. And that meant big savings for you. That $300,000 home, well, if you were paying 4%, $12,000 a year, suddenly your property taxes were capped at 1%, or $3,000 a year. A $9,000 a year difference. I don't know about you, but I could certainly use an extra $9,000 a year. Then, in 2010, voters across the state made property tax caps permanent by putting them in the Indiana Constitution via a statewide referendum. In fact, 72% of all voters voted to make the property tax caps a part of the Indiana Constitution. 72%! That's an ultimate act of bipartisanship we'd never see today. Tax burdens on homeowners were capped at 1%, rental properties 2%, and businesses 3%. There was only one problem. Voters agreed to insert a referendum clause. What a referendum was an opportunity for voters to decide if they wanted to raise their taxes in case of an emergency. The key word there is emergency. You know, like if a building imploded or a parking lot caved in. Referendums were never designed to meet governments who can't get their act together on a day-to-day basis. Property tax caps, in the vast majority of cases, were intended to be final. Somewhere along the way, school corporations figured something out. All they had to do, in the case of these referendums, was get 50% plus 1 of the voters, that's it, 50% plus 1, to agree to raise their taxes. And school corporations also figured out that's pretty easy to do when you can use kids as human shields. And the other crazy part about all this? They could come back and ask to violate people's constitutional rights to tax caps every single year. Absolutely no exceptions. They could come back, until they finally wore the community down and get that 50% plus 1. Since 2011, the following school corporations have enacted referendums, violating their taxpayers' right to property tax caps, not for an emergency, but just because. They include Zionsville, Hamilton Southeastern, Noblesville, Beech Grove, IPS, Decatur Central, and Avon, just to name a few. In fact, since 2015, only 2 major school corporations across the state of Indiana have failed to pass their referendums, those being Clark County and Brownsburg. Yeah, that's right, I said and Brownsburg. School districts continue to whine about the money they've lost since the property tax caps were enacted 10 years ago. Newsflash, that was the point. It wasn't your money. You were spending it irresponsibly, so people took it back. Stop it. Stop whining. Get your act together. The referendum process is a total scam. If lawmakers in Indiana actually want to make a difference, they should stop preventing law-abiding citizens from doing things that don't harm anyone, you know, like gambling on sports or buying cold beer, or even buying a beer all day on Sunday, and actually demand that school corporations get their fiscal house in order. Lawmakers in 2019 should get rid of the referendum process. I'm Rob Kendall, and that's Where'd Your Money Go?